Hello world, and we are back. My name is Kyle Fischl. This is going to be episode 213 of my poker vlog. For this one, I play a session that is actually one of the more difficult tables I've ever played at. There are multiple 5-10 pros at the table, as well as some extremely tight players. So this video is actually going to give a lot of information about how to navigate these less than, let's say, splashy games you might run into on like a Saturday night. And with that out of the way, let's go over some poker hands. At the One Eye Jacks Poker Room in Sarasota, Florida, we buy into the 2-5 no limit game for $1,000 before we arrive at the first hand of note. With an under the gun straddle, there's one limp. I'm in the big blind with King Jack offsuit. I think this is good enough for a raise against two limpers, so I make it $35. The limper and the under the gun player both call, so we end up going three ways to a flop, which comes Jack 7-5 with two diamonds. When playing poker, I often start a session off pretty GTO, pretty standard plays, until my opponents have given me any reason to deviate. So a top pair good kicker on a draw heavy-ish board, we're going to bet small here. On a relatively passive table that would just limp call, I expect to get called by all straight draws, flush draws, weaker jacks, plenty of stuff to get value from, but for $35 both players fold. And we may not win a huge hand, but we do win the first hand, and that's great for momentum and great for confidence as we move forward in the session. Following that, I look down at 7-9 of clubs in the big blind when the +1 player decides to raise to $25. I think you can make an argument for just calling and defending or just folding. On a relatively tight table, this is not quite the hand that I think falls into a good 3-bet bluff, but since it's on the vlog, this time I chose to make the call. We are going heads up to a flop, which comes 9-8 deuce with two spades. One club, pretty good board, top pair, no relevant kicker, but backdoor straight and flush draw means we're definitely not folding on this flop, especially when I check it to my opponent and he bets $30. We are always peeling with top pair, never really getting away from this just yet. And when the turn is the 4 of diamonds, I check to my opponent as I don't have the betting lead. He chooses to check it back. At this point, I think his range is mostly ace-x. Any opponent that had like 2 overs on a flush draw or just like Jack 10 offsuit, if they were the type to bet their draws aggressively, this turn card's not really the one I think they slow down on. So when the river is the 3 of spades, I actually don't expect my opponent to have the flush almost ever. I think all his flush combinations continue barreling the turn. So I think my hand functions very well as a bluff catcher. I think my opponent, if he had like ace high, maybe queen jack for a gutter, may decide they have to bluff on this card, but I would happily have called it off. When I check, my opponent checks it back, and 9-7 is good. We look down at King Jack offsuit again, this time in the small blind. With one limp, the cutoff raises to $25. The limper and myself call, so we end up going three ways to a flop, which comes Queen, Queen, Jack, Rainbow. Two queens is definitely better than one, which is kind of unlikely my opponent has 3 of a kind. When I check it in flow, the pre-flop aggressor bets $20. If my opponent had a queen, I think he would likely bet just a little bit bigger. There are straight draws to protect against, jacks to get value from. So at this point, I just think my opponent is c-betting because the GTO computer says you should c-bet when you're in position and have the betting lead, but I don't really think he connected with this board. I make the call. I think raising's a bit of an overplay, and the other player folds. So we're heads up to a turn card, which is the 8 of diamonds. Not quite the best one, because I think 9-10 would do a c-bet this way. So we do lose to a little bit more hands now, but when I check to my opponent, he checks it back, and the river is the queen of diamonds. If there was any thought my opponent had a queen, that's kind of dissipated now, but what is his range? I think he has a lot of ace highs. Maybe pocket 9s, pocket 10s would c-bet this flop and then not feel too comfortable putting in a second barrel on the turn, but they might feel comfortable to call a small bet on this river. So targeting the portion of my opponent's range that's just ace high and small pocket pairs, I bet $25. I think most people would look at this board and be like, we have a full house, we have to bet massive.
No! Not good! Stop! Not good!
But I think that bet folds out everything besides the jacks that we're chopping with and then the better overpairs that beat us. And maybe my analysis is correct because my opponent eventually just calls. I show my hand, and it's good. So we get to squeak out a little bit more value on this river with the small river bet. On the next hand of note, I said this table was a little bit difficult, and it's kind of illustrated because it folds all the way to the button. At this point, we're doing an under the gun straddle, The button bets $40. I'm in the big blind with queen jack offsuit. And you know, when it folds all the way to the button, that's kind of the sign that it's a bad table. If it was a good table, someone would be limping. Someone would be like 15, 2 callers before it gets to the button. But just folding all the way to the button, and that was happening relatively consistency, is not the best poker game you could sit at. But regardless, the button's very active. I could see a case of turning this queen jack off into a bluff and 3-betting and hopefully winning the $50 of dead money. But I think calling and pot controlling is also fine. I think this hand's plenty strong to be able to continue with. But when I continue, the under the gun straddle makes it $220.
So freaking pissed.
Now, previously in this session, I have seen this opponent limp king-queen suited and limp ace-queen offsuit. So to now come out and nearly 6x 3-bet it, it's like so premium at this point. When the button folds, I'm folding too. And losing $40 pre-flop is actually pretty massive when the table's being really tight and not too much money's going in there. But on the next interesting hand, it folds all the way to me in the cutoff. I have king 5 of clubs. The computer loves this hand, so I'm going to open this one up, make it $35. I actually expect this to get just a walk most of the time, because that's how tight this table had been playing. But the button calls, which is the pretty much worst outcome, the only player that has position on me in the hand, and everyone else fold. So we end up going heads up to a flop, which comes queen 8-4 with 2 clubs. About as good as I could ever hope for. I have the best queens in range. I have a club draw. So we're going to c-bet this one and expect my opponent to fold his entire range. Like even pocket 9s, I think, would just fold to 1 c-bet on this board. So I continue for a little over half pot, really trying to make sure that these pairs are disincentivized to continue. So I bet $40, but this does not discourage my opponent. He continues, and I'm very unhappy to see that, but extremely happy to see the jack of clubs. When he continues on the flop, I actually expect him to have like a decent queen most of the time, and those decent queens are drawing stone dead. So we want to bet a very small sizing to get those hands to not be able to get away from it. I only bet $50 here, trying to make sure that all of his pairs continue. Maybe if he has like 8-9 or jack 10, those will continue as well as they pick up a gut shot. But for $50, my opponent folds. Not quite the outcome I was looking for after I made the flush, but it is nice to win a hand. I win some smaller, less interesting hands before I look down at ace-king offsuit on the button. When the hijack makes it $40, the cutoff calls. When it's on me, I almost certainly have the best hand here, and we would like to protect it, get value from it, get more money in the middle. We make it $150. I don't really expect to get a whole lot of credit being on the button, but ironically, both players fold pretty quickly, so we're able to pick up nearly $90 in dead money with just some pre-flop aggression. That's going to add to my win rate significantly. Next, an example about how to exploit a passive table. I look down at queen jack offsuit in the cutoff. One player limps for $10, I make it $40. The button will not let me see a hand in position today, and the limper calls as well. So I end up going 3 ways to a flop of 10-9-5 with 2 diamonds. When it checks to me, I think c-betting this board would actually be completely fine. 10 high boards are really good for 2 Broadway cards. We almost always get a gut shot straight draw top pair when we get a favorable turn card. But I choose to check this one, see what the button wants to do, and he wants to check it back. I think that rules out all the 10x from his range, most 9s, most straight draws, and most flush draws. So when the turn is the 9 of spades and the limper checks to me a second time, I don't really expect him to have a 10 or a 9 all that often. So I think we could just bet small here, value bet / protect our hand. I bet $40 and both players fold. Not a super intricate hand, but if you start stealing pots like this consistently, your win rate will go up tremendously. On the next fun hand of poker, I'm in the +1 position. I look down at pocket 5s. First pair I've seen all day, should be the best hand. I make it $35. Again, mostly just expecting to get a walk, because that's how this table has been going for a lot of the day. But in this one, the cutoff calls, and we are heads up to a flop of 4-4 deuce rainbow. When I'm first to act here, I just expect my hand to be best here almost always. I expect him to 3-bet all of his premium overpairs, but call with like suited connectors and some ace-x and stuff like that. So thinking my hand could benefit from a lot of protection, I'm going to size up here a bit. I make it $65. Almost potting it. I'm actually shocked here to see my opponent call. I actually think this is an indicator that he has like pocket 7s or pocket 8s, which is less than ideal for me. But the turn is the 3 of hearts. So now I kind of think that this is a good hand to double barrel, We picked up 10 outs to a basically nutted hand, but with pocket fives, I think my opponent's going to check back a lot, thinking that any ace is not really folding when they pick up a straight draw themselves. So expecting this to go check, check, I check it to my opponent, and he bets $100. I actually hate this spot. I think I'm behind almost always. Besides the very infrequent times my opponent has like ace king, and he picked up a gut shot himself and thinks it's good enough to bet. But for $100 and the implied odds I'm going to get, because I'm definitely leading if I make my hand on this one, I decided to make the call this time, and the river is the 8 of diamonds. Does not improve my hand, so I'm pretty much going to give up on this one. When I checked on my opponent, he pretty quickly checks it back. I actually think there's a chance I'm good here, but he has pocket queens.
What the hell is that?
So this is just an example about how tight the table had been playing. Opponent doesn't even 3-bet queens from the cutoff and doesn't even try to value bet a river with queens. So if you're ever at a table and you're not paying attention, you really should be, because if you saw this river action, you should peg the pocket queens player as absolutely never bluffing river, and you should just never call off river against that particular player if the hand class they need to bet river is stronger than this. But on the next hand of note, I'm on the button, and because 3 players at the table are missing, as you can see, the hijack is actually also the under the gun straddle. So when the cutoff checks, I'm on the button, I have queen jack offsuit, I raise to $30. The hijack slash under the gun straddle makes it $135. Now this player was probably the only one giving action at this table. He was 3-betting at probably a 20 to 25% frequency. Absolutely gargantuan compared to the rest of the table. So that gives me a little bit less credibility that this 3-bet is actually a strong hand. Additionally, when he was 3-betting in the full ring lineup, his 3-bets were closer to 90, 100, maybe 110. So when he makes it 135, I don't think this is the player type where their raise size directly correlates to the hand strength. Like some players, they'll open to 20 and then they look down at aces and all of a sudden it's open raised to like 50 because they're just going for max protection and they're afraid to get their aces cracked. This player, I would say, is the exact inverse. I would say the larger sizing is actually indicative of a weaker hand that needs to maximize the fold equity that they may have. Maybe he's just sizing up a little bit because he's out of position. Either way, I give this 3-bet very little credibility. So we're going to go for a 4-bet bluff with queen jack offsuit. I make it $325. As my opponent does not snap call and begins thinking, after about 10 or 15 seconds, it's very clear that he's in the jam or fold mode. And at this point, I've somewhat made up my mind that, well, I guess the play didn't work, but hopefully he's thinking about jamming with like 7s or ace-5 suited. Either way, something where I have 40 or 50% equity is not the worst outcome when you decide to 4-bet bluff, but also not exactly the best outcome. But after about 45 seconds, my opponent settles on a fold.
If you didn't want to play, then why'd you come to the party?
And you know, if we're going to 4-bet bluff, we got to show it, because why do a big 4-bet bluff unless you're going to show the table that you are capable of moves in the specific circumstances where they are warranted? My opponent would later tell me that he had king-queen suited and was thinking about jamming or folding. If he is telling the truth, I am happy he settled on fold. While we ride this adrenaline high of getting a pretty big bluff through, we look down at ace-king offsuit in the low jack. I make it $30. The button and the under the gun straddle calls, so we end up going 3 ways to the flop, which is ace jack 4 rainbow. As I'm out of position to the button, when it checks to me, I'm going to check this one back. I think I gain a lot of information based on what my opponents do, and the button bets $50. When this is the opponent that does not bet queens on the river, like, I'm only beating one hand at this point, and that's ace queen exactly. Ace jack beats me. I don't think ace 10 would bet into 2 people from this specific person, but hoping my opponent has ace queen, I'm calling with the ace king. When the turn is the 9 of spades, not a particularly bad card, my opponent continues for $75. I very much hate this. I actually think he has ace jack here a lot of the time, but I'm not able to fold ace king just yet. And the river is the bink king of clubs. Now absolutely pegging this opponent for ace jack and hoping he doesn't have pocket jacks. I actually think ace jack might check this back some of the time, so I'm just going to lead out here, value bet my own hand. I make it $165, and before I can even get my chips into the middle, my opponent snap calls. I actually think I'm dead, but my opponent eventually flips over ace-king for the same hand.
You will see white sails on that horizon.
And again, if this opponent's not going to 3-bet queens from the cutoff or ace-king from the button, you should just, like, never call if a player this tight 3-bets ever. Like, this is the guy you fold kings to and just say nice hand and don't show, don't say anything, don't make a big deal about it. It's just one of these player types you really have to identify when you're in one of the tougher games. Luckily, we're able to continue to win smaller pots before we look down at the final hand of note. With ace-jack of clubs from the low jack, I make it $20 as the straddle is off, and the hijack and the cutoff decide to call. So I'm going 3 ways to a flop, which is 9-8-3 with 2 spades. Pretty similar to the ace-queen hand that I stole, but out of position I'm going to check to my opponent, see what they want to do. When they both check, they pretty much never have a 9 or an 8 or an overpair. Probably underpairs are unlikely too. So when the turn is the parts, I think my hand is just best here. I think my opponents have complete air and they're pretty passive. So when I throw out a $40 bet,
What, boy, what? I take the both of you.
I'm pretty happy to see both of them fold, and we take down one final hand before racking up. So we're into the game for $1,000, out of the game for $1,490, which is a profit of $490 across 5 hours, equates to $98 an hour, or 19 big blinds an hour. Yeah, extremely happy to make a profit on this table. This was not the easiest table to navigate, but then you just gotta start putting some moves in. Put in a 4-bet bluff, find the marginal spots to steal pots here and there, and that's how you're gonna end up making money at these tables. You're not just gonna get a, stacks in with aces and the kings all too often, but there's definitely money to be had if you can adjust and navigate correctly. If you've made all to this point, I appreciate you watching my videos. Really, I do. Please consider subscribing, and I will see you on the next one.